Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Jennifer Dye, a librarian at Detroit Public Library. The library has had a strong program with the League of Women Voters for over a year now. We present on issues of concern to Michigan voters about 10 months of the year. You were brought into this program muted. Please put any questions into the chat. Ruth Coolwine will capture these questions and ask them at the end of the presentation. We might be able to allow people to unmute at the end to ask questions directly if time allows. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on DPL's and the Detroit League's websites. Rhonda Craig, president of the League of Women Voters Detroit, will speak briefly about the League and the Detroit group.
Hello, everybody. It's so great to see everybody here. You represent people who are interested in good government and good democracy. Let me tell you a little bit about the Detroit League of Women Voters. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with national, state, and local components. For over 100 years, we have worked to empower our voters by informing citizens about local candidates, public policy, and advocacy programs. We encourage active and informed participation in the government. The League does not endorse candidates or political parties. Our goal is to have our officials represent our entire community and not just a few. We work to ensure that each and every vote is counted and that the voting systems are fair and accessible to all. We invite all of you to join us as we make democracy work in our communities. The League of Women Voters Detroit is open to new members who share our ideals. The League registers new voters, we educate voters on upcoming elections, and we advocate for voters' rights. We work to engage Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park citizens in local governance. We seek diversity, equity, and inclusion in all our endeavors. We register voters, we have community town halls, and we have candidate forums. So join, because you can be a force for change for your community, yourself, and your country. We also have some petitions that are coming up that if you're interested in passing out, these are petitions to counter some of the anti-voting laws that are being promoted around the state. So please, if you want to help us, you can contact League at lwvdetroit.org. That's our website, lwvdetroit.org, to find information on how you can help be a petition circulator, because we need people out there to work to keep our democracy functioning. And remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Our speaker tonight is Eric Lupher, president of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. The Citizens Research Michigan is an organization of Michigan citizens founded in 1916 to devote continuing attention to state and local government affairs. For more than 100 years, the goal of the Citizens Research Council has been to provide tools to the citizens of Michigan to secure good state and local governments that are responsible and accountable to the public, adopt sound public policies, and make effective and efficient use of resources in carrying out their responsibilities. Through its research and publications, the Citizens Research Council provides an independent, nonpartisan, and objective source of factual information on state and local policy issues. The Citizens Research Council does not lobby, support candidates for public office, or take positions on ballot questions. It has a long history of analyzing initiatives and referendums on the statewide ballot so voters can make informed decisions on their votes. Eric Lupher has been president of the organization since 2014. He has been with the Research Council since 1987, the first 2 years as an intern in the Lent Upson Lauren Miller Fellowship Program, and since then as a research associate, director of local affairs, and now president of the organization. During this span, he has done studies on many different state and local government policy issues. Much of his work over the past couple of years has concentrated on local government issues, including government finance, organization, service provision, and the consolidation of local governments. He has served in leadership positions with the Governmental Research Association and the Governmental Accounting Standards Advisory Council, an advisory body for the Government Accounting Standards Board, representing the user community on behalf of the Governmental Research Association. He received a Bachelor of Arts from James Madison College and Michigan State University and a Master's of Public Administration from Wayne State University. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Eric Lupher.
Thank you, Jennifer. So yes, thank you very much. I'm always happy to come and speak with the League of Women Voters. We have almost as long of a history as the League. We date back to 1916, and our missions very much align. You've focused on elections and voting, and but we're all about nonpartisanship and getting information to citizens and voters. So the kinship is very strong, and we're happy to be here today and into the future helping you. So my first message, as you think about all the ballot questions, is know what you are signing. There have been instances in the last couple of decades where people have, after the fact, complained that they felt they were lied to get their signature on a petition. And this came to the state Supreme Court back with the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. And I'm not going to read you all this. You can read it as well as I can. But the basic message from the state Supreme Court is that it is not the government's job to regulate free speech. You have to know when you're being lied to. And your choice to put your signature on a petition is akin to you signing a contract. You're not just writing your name down as supporting it, you're signing it. And that carries the force of law. We have retained the right to initiative, which is casting the people as legislators. And you need to take that serious. It's very important. So I want to start off real quick by talking about how questions get onto the ballot. Why are we voting on them? So the one that we most readily recognize is the right to vote on a constitutional amendment. This is provided to us in our state constitution in two different ways. One is the right of the people to circulate petitions, and you have to get at least 10% of the number of votes cast in the last gubernatorial election. So go back to 2018, you're going to count up all the votes for Republican Party, the Democratic Party candidate, all the Green Party, and everything else. And then the sum of that, we're going to look for 10% of those as the minimum number of signatures that you have to collect. In this case, it's 425,059 signatures. Those have to be submitted to the State Board of Canvassers by July 11th in order for them to verify that you have the requisite number of signatures, and then it'll appear on the November ballot. We also have the ability of the legislature to place questions on the ballot. There are several joint resolutions before the House and the Senate currently. We don't have any great insights on which, if any of them, are going to be voted on by 2/3 votes of each chamber of the legislature and appear, but there's still a chance, in addition to everything I'm going to talk to you about today, that we could end up with some legislatively proposed questions. We also have the initiated statute. This is creating law, just like the legislature does. As I said, this is something that we have retained the right as citizens that we want to have control of this. It requires a lesser number of signatures, only 8% of that total 340,000. And those have to be submitted by June 1st. So one of the issues we've identified, if you always want to go for more than you need because you know some signatures are going to appear twice and some are people have moved and whatever. So if you're going to go beyond 8, why not go beyond 10? And so the narrow gap between constitutional amendments and initiated statutes is an issue for Michigan. Real quick, I'm not going to spend much time on this. We also, in other instances, get questions on the ballot because the people have called for a referendum on a law that was enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor. That can happen with 5% of the votes cast on in the gubernatorial election. We don't have at this point any of those before us. Sometimes the legislature can enact a law and say, we think this is what the people want, but we want to ask them directly. So they say, people vote on Public Act 202, tell us whether you want that to be a law or not. Again, we don't have any of those at this point. We also, from time to time, get questions on bond approval, the ability for the state to borrow money, and then the people have to give that approval. This is only in certain instances. There is a chance we could end up with a bond question in November, but nothing has made it that far yet. So I want to start off with 4 questions that petitions are being circulated, but we probably will not vote on those. So why is that? Well, Michigan is one of 18 states where the voters have retained the power to initiate statutes. In Michigan, it's what we call an indirect initiative. So we go out, we circulate the petitions, we collect a sufficient number. The proposed law is then submitted to the legislature, and they have the ability within 40 session days to decide if they should just make that law without a vote of the people, or if they choose not to, then it appears on the November ballot. Michigan is one of the states where the governor has no ability to veto that. There's only one other state that has that. So you see at the bottom here, there's 4 other states that have that indirect initiative: Maine, Massachusetts, Nevada, and Ohio. But only one of those other states bypasses the governor. And so we've cut out a system of checks and balances. And what we have, in this case, it's the Republican legislature bypassing a Democratic governor. In the past, it has worked the other way. But we've created a bastardized way of using this initiative process to cut out our checks and balances and one party get what it needs. It needs only 8% of the number of votes cast on petition, and then the requisite number of votes of the legislature, and it becomes law, and it requires a supermajority to amend it. So let's talk about those. We have what they call Secure My Vote. This is a law that was a bill that was circulated by our Republican legislature in the wake of the 2020 election and all the baggage that came with that, the idea that there was some sort of fraud out in the election process. So they wanted to really protect against the ability to do that. So they want to protect against people voting as somebody else, requiring a part of your social security number for voter registration, require photo identification for in-person voting, require identification for absentee voter application, which makes it hard to If you can't get to City Hall or your township hall, how are you going to show the identification? You got to copy that. It really becomes cumbersome. Require validating identification. If it's lacking at the ballot place, you have to come back and validate it another time. Not everybody has an identification, so the law would provide funding so that the indigent can get an identification and still have their voting rights reserved. And it goes on, prohibits donations. There was a lot of controversy about that. Require voters to request an absentee ballot. Jocelyn Benson sent out blanket applications for everyone to apply. So a lot of that is a reaction to this. This was adopted by both houses of the legislature. Governor Whitmer vetoed it, and now they're using this process to try to make it law without her being able to veto it. We have what they're calling Unlock Michigan 2. Again, this is in the wake of the pandemic. Governor Whitmer declared a public health emergency, and that gave her the ability to shut down gyms and the casino and restaurants and all that. And what this would do is say that any determinations of a public health emergency have to be in writing. That changes nothing really. Governor Whitmer, in fact, had executive orders which were done in writing. And it would make it clear that those expire 28 days after that determination in writing, unless the state legislature or the local governing body extends it. So really what this changes, all of our focus has been at the state level with Governor Whitmer and the Department of Health and Human Services declaring these health emergencies. We also have the ability for local health emergencies. If this was localized to the city of Detroit, then the public health director could say, we need to shut down restaurants in the city of Detroit. Well, this would say that could only last for 28 days at the maximum unless city council extends that. So it's very much in reaction to the people that felt deprived of their rights because of the actions in trying to protect lives during the pandemic. Again, that was circulated by the legislature, both chambers. Governor Whitmer vetoed it. Now they want to make it law. We have two proposals, statutory initiatives to create, in essence, a voucher program for students to attend private schools. It creates what's called the Student Opportunity Scholarship Program. And it would provide some funding, but there's also a way for people to contribute to these scholarships. If you're going to go to a public school, whether that is a charter school or out of district, sometimes you have to provide matching costs. This would provide $500 for anybody attending public schools, would provide $1,100 for public school students with disabilities. And for anyone attending a non-public school, 90% of the per student per pupil funding amounts. So right now it's universal across the state, $8,700. You would get, 90% of that to help with the tuition at a non-public or a private school. They can only be used for qualifying education expenses. So this isn't going to pay for your ability to be on the football or basketball team or soccer or anything like that. Only for qualifying education expenses. And the entities that would be involved in this are limited in how much administrative expenses they can do. So again, this was circulated and vetoed. The other side of it, you have, because they're law, you can't do everything in one amendment. One of them creates, one bill in essence creates this voucher program. The other one amends the Michigan Income Tax Act to allow a tax credit for anybody contributing to the scholarship programs, and it provides some appropriation. So let my kids learn A and B are related, but they have to be done separately. So all four of those, there is really no intention by the legislature for them to use those 40 days and let it go to the people in November. They're trying to do this to bypass the governor's veto. But we have many others that are not done for that purpose. So we have, I think 11 of these. I'm going to try to spend 3 or 4 minutes on each one. So there's a little bit of time for question and answer. That means sort of by definition, I'm going to go fast through these. I'm not going to hit all these bullet points. I hope they're big enough that you can read them on your computers as we go. So Promote the Vote 2022. I know this is one that the League of Women Voters is behind supporting. It is piggybacking on Promote the Vote that was done in 2018 to try to enable more people to vote. Some of this is undoing what you saw in that, the one I just talked about on voting, and some of it is external to that. So we want to recognize the fundamental right to vote without harassing conduct, provide for absentee balloting for military and overseas, the right to verify identity. A lot of this is ingraining up what's already in law, making sure it doesn't get changed with future legislative action. It's going to provide state-funded postage for absentee ballots. That's been an issue in the past. If people can't get to a drop box or something like that, you need to put it in the post office. Then if the cost is an issue, we're going to make sure that gets funded by the state. It's going to provide that only if election officials can conduct a post-election audit. You saw in other states like Arizona where non-election related, not government people were trying to do this audit. This is going to say that only government people can do that. It requires a window for early in-person voting. You see this a lot in other states where they have a 1 week or a 2 week window for people to actually go to City Hall, Township Hall, or whatever to vote. It's akin to the absentee balloting, but you just go get it done, turn it in, and you're done. Would allow for donations to fund elections, but that must be disclosed, so no dark money. And the issue that we went through at 2020 with the canvassing boards, base their results only on the official record of the votes cast. So hopefully take out some ability to protest over some of the superfluous actions that were being contested. We have another voting related, actually 2 more. This is My Right to Vote A. Again, it's a constitutional amendment. It creates a window for people to submit petitions for a voter initiated so a voter initiated question. Right now we have a 120-day window, and if you sign a petition and you know it got stretched out for more than 120 days, the circulators have to choose what 120-day window they want to pick from. This amendment would say we're going to use everything for a 2-year period, but you have to turn it in at least 60 days before the election. Have to be counted at least 60 days before. It have to be submitted 120 days before election day. So it creates a bigger window for circulation of petitions to know that all the signatures will count. We have the ability now to enact laws. The legislature uses this as another gimmick. If they put in an appropriation in some way, it becomes referendum proof. You can't call for a referendum. The idea is we don't want to bog down state government who needs to pass appropriations to do their job with the ability to call a referendum on it. Now you can't run your corrections department, or you can't fund the state police because there's a referendum. The law doesn't take effect. So they use the gimmicks. They'll put in $100 or $1,000, and this amendment would say you can't do that anymore. We're going to take away the ability to make things referendum proof. It eliminates the legislature's power to approve voter-initiated laws. So this indirect initiative that I just explained to you, this would remove that, send the statutory initiated statutes directly to the voters. And if a law is passed by statutory initiative, it would require either the voters to go back and amend it, or a supermajority, a 3/4 vote of the legislature to, I'm sorry, I messed up. So require voters or 3/4 vote of the legislature to reenact laws that were rejected by referendum. And this is a reaction to the emergency manager law that the people called for a referendum. They said, we don't like that law, and the legislature went right back within weeks and enacted another law that did the same thing as what the people just rejected. So this would say you can't do that anymore unless you get a supermajority of the vote. So that was my right to vote A. This is my right to vote B. It's a continuation of this, recognizing the fundamental right to vote, 2 weeks of in-person absentee balloting, that window. One says 9 days, this says 14 days, or 2 weekends, I'm sorry. 2 weekends before, require drop boxes. I don't need to read all these bullet points to you. Allow officials for counting, they have to have 7 days. So this is the issue of opening up the absentee ballots, having them ready to count on election day, something that was contested in 2020. And some of what's being proposed, again, in that earlier initiated statute, this would prohibit imposing undue burdens on voting, requiring ID, to vote absentee, some of those same things directly targeted at that earlier statute, initiated statute, to say we really want to make sure none of that goes forward. So here's another statutory initiative, Audit Michigan, Audit MI. That's a direct reaction to the 2020 election. This statutory initiative would force a forensic audit of the 2020 election, something that has happened several times now. It would change how Michigan conducts elections, audits after elections. It would create this new audit board that would be composed of 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats, selected by the legislature. So it would cut the Secretary of State and any election officials out of the process. So we elect the Secretary of State to run elections. This would attempt to cut him or her out of it. I think that probably sets the stage for a constitutional battle. The Secretary of State saying those powers are vested in the office, and we'll probably end up with a legal fight if this is a fact. And it would create a grand jury system that would investigate any findings and follow up from the audits. We have another attempt to initiate a minimum wage increase through the statutory initiative process. We tried this a couple of years ago. Petitions were circulated, certified as having enough, sent to the legislature. The legislature adopted it and right away gutted it. They changed the date. So here we go. We're going to try to do this again. It increases the minimum wage, as you can see in stages, first to $11 an hour next year, and by 2027, up to $15 an hour. It then pegs it to the rate of inflation, the consumer price index, going forward. So we wouldn't presumably have to go back and change the law after this. It would continue to escalate as inflation drove the minimum wage higher. Right now, we have two different rates for tipped workers, waiters, waitresses, and the like. Another for the non-tip. This eliminates that differential and says that employees can keep their tips unless they agree to share them with other non-managerial employees. So if you're a waiter or a waitress that benefits from the busboy and the maitre d' and everything, you can agree to share your tips. You're not to count them as part of your wages and not to be shared with management. And it removes the state authority to approve a lower minimum wage for those minors, high school kids, and apprentices that are just entering the workforce. So everyone would have the same minimum wage under this proposed statutory initiative. With the prospect that the case before the U.S. Supreme Court could undo Roe versus Wade, we have a proposed constitutional amendment that basically puts into law, our current law, it puts that into our state constitution. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of analysis of this. You might find some difference of, but the basic concept is there, that it establishes an individual right to reproductive freedom, including the right to make all decisions about pregnancy, prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and fertility. So clearly abortion is in there, as well as contraceptive and a lot of other things that raise the attention of people on either side of the political spectrum. It allows the right to an abortion, but it doesn't provide that universally. You can see that if once you reach fetal viability, then there would be restrictions, just as we have now. It forbids the state to discriminate enforcement of the right, prohibits prosecution of individual or persons helping a pregnant individual. We see that down in Texas, and some other states are following that suit. You don't charge the person getting the abortion, you charge the people, the doctor and others helping that person with their needs. This would prohibit that and invalidate all laws that conflict with it. So you might not know there's a 1931 law in Michigan that forbids abortion. The concerned Governor Whitmer just filed suit, and others are trying to figure out what happens with that 1931 law if the U.S. Supreme Court undoes Roe versus Wade. And that little provision in this proposed constitutional amendment says that law is nullified because it would conflict with this amendment. So here we go, another one, Michiganders for Fair Lending. This is a statutory initiative to amend the Deferred Presentment Service Transaction Act. So this has to do with payday loans. Right now, the way the law is written, It is tremendously burdensome on anybody taking a payday loan, and how the interest rates that get charged on that. And what it boils down to, this third bullet is really the key point. It prohibits service fees on the loans that are above an annual percentage rate of 36% and require a consumer warning of that maximum rate. In fact, we see now that because the rate escalates over time, it can be as much as 300% if you take out that loan and hold and not pay it within a few days. That interest rate builds on itself, and we see people taking out a second payday loan to pay back the first payday loan. So that's sort of the crux of that one. People that advocate for it feel it is very important. Michigan United is a statutory initiative to repeal the truth in sentencing law. This was done 30 and 40 years ago to say that when somebody is convicted of a crime and they're sentenced, we know that's the amount of time they're going to serve in jail. So the people that are promoting this statutory initiative feel like that system has failed, that there should be incentives for people in prison to do the right things, to get educated, to start turning their life around, and with those credits, be able to get out of jail sooner. So again, I point you to this third bullet, establish new types of earned credits that reduce prisoner sentences for earning a college degree or certification, being employed, working in a training program, earning special rehabilitation credits for people with disabilities. So we'll have to do some analysis to really break this down and figure out how it would play out. But the bottom line is there would be a great difference in at the time of sentencing, how this is conveyed to the prisoner and the victims, how much time is a minimum sentence, the maximum, how these credits could play out that a person could finish their time sooner or good behavior. We have another initiative for community health, again, a statutory initiative. This one would amend the public health code. It would reduce the maximum penalty for possessing non-prescribed drugs from a felony to a misdemeanor, prohibit prosecution for minuscule amounts of drugs found on paraphernalia. So if you have a pipe or a bong, there's residues of the illegal drugs, this says that would be no longer sufficient grounds to be prosecuted. But really what this is meant to do is to allow for the use of psychedelic plants and mushrooms, sort of the magic mushrooms. We saw this in Detroit last year. The city chose to, through a ballot question, chose to decriminalize the use of these psychedelic plants and mushrooms. And now they're trying to do this on a statewide basis. It provides some exemptions. You can see that final bullet there for the sale, provision, and supervising. So we have done a little bit of analysis of this because we looked at the Detroit question, as I said last year, and really what you need to think about with this one is marijuana, which we have legalized in Michigan. First it was decriminalized, now we've legalized it. Now we're Detroit City Council just provided for as many as 100 retail outlets, and so we sort of allowed marijuana, which is still federally classified as a Schedule I narcotic. We've sort of made that the norm now, that we can have that in Michigan and allow personal choice on use. And these questions sort of equates that the psychedelic plants and mushrooms maybe should be treated the same way. And from the research we've done, we can see how under proper supervision and medical oversight, there might be a role for that, the use of these Schedule I narcotics, but it is really inadvisable for people to do this on their own without proper supervision. So maybe a middle ground with all this, but if this gets enacted, then it's going to require some sort of intervention to push back and find that middle ground. This would decriminalize it all the way. There is another statutory initiative to sort of bypass the Electoral College. And it would say that Michigan would cast its Electoral College votes for whoever wins the national popular vote. So we have had a few instances over the years where the person that won the national vote, if you count all the votes from all the states, put them into a single bucket, that the person that got the most of those votes did not become president because of the Electoral College, where each state is counted separately. And if you can, the whole red state, blue state, if you can play your cards right, which states you win, then you can, there's still a path to the presidency. This would say if enough other states join into an agreement, then Michigan will be part of that. And the presumption is that with the agreement of all those other states, those Electoral College votes would be enough to follow the will of the people in the national popular vote and make that candidate the winner. There's a lot of controversy with this. Of course, the Republican Party has benefited from this most recently with Donald Trump and George W. Bush a few years ago. So there's some pushback with this. As you can tell, the way this is worded, it's a national movement. There's a number of states that are trying to push this through and make this a law. And if those states achieve that, then it really won't matter what the other states do, because the electoral votes will be there to make this the law of the land. We have a proposed constitutional amendment to change term limits and increase financial transparency for state elected officials. So let me explain this. Right now, a person, if they so choose, and if the cards align, they can serve up to 14 years in the legislature, 6 in the House of Representatives, 8 in the Senate. Michigan has very strict term limits. So once you serve those 14 years, it's a lifetime limit. You can't come back and sit out and come back at some time. And our analysis you can find on our website, crcmich.org. We found that there's a lot of problems with this. So you think about having 6 years in the House. That means that the Speaker of the House, the party leaders will have served 4 years before rising to the leadership of the chamber. That's just not a whole lot of time to really hone their craft, be good at negotiating with the other party, doing the things that we want with leadership. In the Senate, it's the same sort of thing because you're serving 2 4-year terms. Somebody served 4 years, they run for re-election, win, and now their party says, we choose this person to be the Senate majority leader, the Senate minority leader, the whips, and so on. So there just isn't that much time to build relationships, or to really build the capacity to serve effectively in these leadership positions. So what this proposal would say is, instead of a maximum of 14 years, you would now have 12 years. And it would be up to the candidate to say, I want to be in the House for 6 terms. I want to be in the Senate for 3 terms. I want to mix and match, kind of like we have now. But once those 12 years are done, time's up, and then you're excused, and we have to find somebody else to serve in that House or Senate district. The transparency, Michigan has is one of 2 states that really have very weak ethics laws. We don't have any financial transparency requirements for our state elected officials. The legislature has them as a House rule and a Senate rule, but really there's very little teeth in it. And I, as a citizen, would have a hard time getting those disclosure agreements and being able to do something. So the sunshine that we want with our ethics laws is really lacking. This would say for the Michigan governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, members of the House of Representatives, members of the Senate, you have to live by the same requirements that apply to the members of Congress under the Federal Ethics in Government Act of 1978. So there's a lot of other need for ethics reform in Michigan. This would be one step for financial transparency and allowing the people to understand, the people that are making laws that affect us, what is their personal interest? What is their family interest in some of those laws? And finally, there is a talk of a petition process to deal with gun safety. So this one is more of an idea than an actual petition. All the others have drafted the petitions, have come to summary statements on them. Many of them are in the field already. Some should be turned in fairly soon. This one, to my knowledge, a petition has not been drafted yet or put before the Board of State Canvassers, but it has been discussed. And the idea arose out of the Oxford High School shootings. And it says that the legislature is not going to enact stricter gun safety measures, and the people will try to do it themselves. We want to take that on and try to tighten things up. So yeah, that I went a little bit quicker than I thought, but I hope I gave you enough information to digest everything. And if you think about all of those, if they should all make it to the ballot, there is a real potential that becomes a long ballot with little descriptions of each one and asking the people. And if that wasn't enough, you think about the fact that this November, we will also be electing our members of Congress. We will be electing the governor and lieutenant governor. We will be electing the attorney general and the secretary of state. We will be electing Michigan senators, members of the House of Representatives, members of the state Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, our county commissioners and the borough officers. We include the prosecuting attorney and the sheriff and register of deeds and so on. We will be electing township offices. In some cities, we'll be electing mayor and city council members, not in Detroit, but in many other cities. At the local level, we will be electing circuit court judges and district court judges. And we are very likely to see a number of local proposals dealing with city charter amendments and tax questions and a whole range of other things. So the need for the League of Women Voters will never be as strong as it has the potential to be this November, and helping people to understand what's before them and making sure they come to the ballot informed and ready to make the decisions that will affect them. So, yeah, as I said, I didn't want to bog down too much just reading the bullet points, but I hope I gave you enough to understand. And Ruth, I think maybe you have a few questions that we can go over.
Yes, I do. So the first question, and it was answered a little bit in the chat, but I wonder if you have any other commentary on it. In particular, regarding the proposal and the Roe v. Wade possibly being overturned. So how can a state constitutional policy override a federal law in the event that Roe v. Wade is ended? And then the response that came in the chat is that it's because the premise for invalidating Roe v. Wade is that the state's rights, is that the state has the right to make and enforce its own laws on the topic. Do you have anything to add to that, or any other ideas that you'd like to?
No, I reinforce that. The controversy leading up to Roe v. Wade in 1972 was, should this be individual decisions? Should it be regulated by the states, or is there a role for the federal government under the US Constitution? Roe v. Wade said, yes, in fact, there is a role for the federal government, and that became the law of the land for all 50 states. The challenge that's before the court now is, did Roe v. Wade go too far? Did it read into the Constitution something that isn't explicitly stated? And if so, return to the ability for each state to make its own determination. So we see Mississippi law was the one that's being contested. We've seen Texas and several other states follow suit to say, if in fact Roe is overturned, this is what they want their state law to be, in each case, prohibiting abortions or making it very difficult, tightening the window of opportunity. And so Michigan, and there's a few other states that are moving the other direction to say they don't want to, they want to keep some restrictions. They don't want people in their 9th month going for abortions or things like that. But they're trying to make sure that the right to abortion is preserved in their own state laws.
Thank you. The next question is regarding the national popular vote. And the question is, how many other states have adopted the national popular vote initiative?
That is a good question. I don't know the current status of it. And that it is written in a way that Michigan law would not become effective until the requisite number of states, other states join in. So we couldn't take one step forward and 49 other states take one step backward, and we're left out there on our own. It would only become effective if enough other states did this. I don't know the status of where that is and how many states have taken that action.
Is there a, you said it's a national initiative. Is there a national organizing group that's maybe keeping track of that online?
Yeah, I think their website is National Popular Vote, or if you Google National Popular Vote, you should be able to find that group. And there is an organizing body that's trying to shepherd the states through and make this the law of the land. I didn't think to look at that before talking to you today.
That's okay. I appreciate that. What happens if conflicting proposals get adopted?
That's a good question. So the first thing to keep in mind is that constitutional law trumps statutory law. So I started off talking about a statutory initiative to protect fraud in voting. And then I talked about 2 constitutional efforts to preserve the right to vote. If all of those become law, whether the legislature does it or it gets to the people, the constitutional questions will prevail over the statutory question. And then the question is, if there's inconsistency between those 2 constitutional questions, what happens? And in that case, the question that receives the greatest percentage of yes votes prevails over the other one. There's some inconsistencies. I mentioned a 9-day in-person voting for one and a 2 weekend for the other. So some things like that. So first question is constitutional versus statutory. Second question is, how did the people treat it? And did they, through their votes, express greater support for one than the other?
Another
But
question.
It is probably a recipe for legal challenges somewhere down the line.
Sure. So a lot of that would get challenged and decided in courts later.
Yeah, I think likely.
And it sounds like that's the case maybe for a lot of the more politically motivated proposals in general.
Yes, I think it's safe to say there are many attorneys that will make a pretty good payday litigating the effects of the November election one way or the other.
Do you know what group is proposing the audit proposal?
Yeah. Okay. I think their name is Audit Michigan. Down somewhere, but the Zoom software isn't letting me get to it really easily. I can find that as we continue talking, and I'll let you know.
Sure. If term limits are changed from 14 years to 12 years total, what is the breakdown for reps and senators?
So that's the thing, is it would be up to each elected official to decide how they want to spend their time. They could choose to be a representative for 6 terms, 2 years each term. That would get them to 12 years. They could choose to be a senator for 3 terms, 4 years each term. That could get them to 12 years. Or they could choose to mix and match in some way in an effort that gets them to 12 years. Presumably, if you served 10 years, then you couldn't run for a Senate seat, which is 4 years, and would push you past that 12. But yeah, the bottom line is they could choose to do that any way they wanted. And the hope of the proponents is that there would be people that say, let me serve 5 or 6 terms in the House, and presumably, you know, they could rise to the leadership level. They've been around for a while. They've established relationships with other representatives or other senators. So the hope of the proponents is that it would undo some of the weaknesses created by our current system.
Mhm. And then will we have access to your PowerPoint outside of the recording to share with others in addition to the recording?
Yes, it'll be on our website, crcmich.org, tomorrow morning, and I can make it available to the league if you want to post it on your website as well.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe I'll put that what URL in the chat, crcmich.org.
Yes, crcmich.org.
All right. And then another question, once 270 is reached in the, I believe we're talking about the national popular vote. If the winner of the popular vote loses the electoral, which prevails?
So the idea is that you get enough states. So our current system, if you think to election night and we sit there staring at this map of the US that gets coded red and blue, and the commentators will talk about the major states, Ohio and Florida and Michigan, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, because there's a large number of electoral votes, and those states can often be the swing states that decide what happens, what tilts the electoral college for the Republican or the Democratic Party. And the effort with this national popular vote is to get enough of those states, but also enough of, you'll have California and New York and Massachusetts that typically go Democratic, but feel they've been cheated with this electoral process, because even though they're casting votes for the national vote getter, national popular vote winner, their candidate's not getting elected. So all of those states pulling in, they will be the electoral college winner as well as the national popular vote winner. There won't be a difference anymore, because enough states will be voting based on that national popular vote.
Out of all of these proposals, what would be the one that the Citizens Research Council of Michigan think is the most important to address needed change?
So I am here to describe the questions. I'm not here to prioritize those or to try to persuade you to vote yes or no, or to even sign a petition. As I started off saying, I think knowing what you're signing is the first step. So this is step one in doing the education, and hopefully you can do some more research if I've failed to explain anything adequately to you. And I hope everybody in our audience will decide for themselves. I don't have an opinion on which one is the most important.
How long does it take to verify the signatures and know which questions will be on the ballot?
Yeah, so normally it takes 3 or 4 weeks. I think the Department of State has been going through some staffing issues, just like so many other employers, and there will be the added complication potentially this year of many petitions being turned in at approximately the same time, which strains the ability of staff to go through these. And they do a sampling of it, right? So they're not going through every petition signature and trying to verify that that is in fact the signature of John Doe, and he doesn't in fact live at 123 Elm Street in Detroit, Michigan. But they're trying to take a sampling of them, statistically significant. There is a great amount of work involved, and it is time consuming, and then you get challenges by the opponents or proponents, somebody who pulled out a different sample and said, well, you've missed these illegitimate signatures or these legitimate signatures. So there's a whole legal and advocacy cottage industry about getting these questions on or off the ballot. The process is set up to allow enough time to the legislature to do their work. But this by far would be the busiest election season since we have allowed the initiative and referendum in Michigan.
All right. I think that's the end of our questions, unless we want to, oh, there's another question that just came in. I'm circulating a petition for promote the vote, and I had to indicate whether I'm a volunteer or being paid. Is this the same for all petitions?
Yes. So you recall at the beginning, I talked a little bit about the trying to get the petition circulators to tell the truth and what's the role of this. So there's been a lot of controversy in Michigan, but also in other states that allow for the initiative and referendum on paying petition circulators. Do they really have, are they really expressing their right to free speech by doing this, or are they only chasing the dollar they're going to get paid for the signature? Do they really care if Michigan is part of the national popular vote? So in other states have gone before us in requiring statement on the petition that the circulator is a volunteer or a paid circulator. Other states will have different color petitions to signify this. Maybe an orange petition if it's a volunteer, or a blue if it's a paid circulator. Some other states require the circulator to have a badge on saying I'm a paid circulator. We can't forbid these groups from paying the circulators. The courts have said that's violation of their free speech rights. But we can make it clear to the people being approached what may be the motives of the person with that petition. Read into that what you want. There's very good paid circulators and there's volunteers with ulterior motives. I don't wish to cast aspersions, but at least having more information is better.
All right. So there, unless there's other questions coming in, or Jennifer, I don't know if you want to open it up for people to ask.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Ruth, very much. And thank you, Eric. I really appreciate the fact that you stayed neutral. That is very important for the library too, to stay neutral on these issues. We wanted people to be informed. If you would like to ask a question directly, you can go down to reactions at the bottom of the screen and raise your hand, and I can give you permission to ask the question directly. And if no one wants to, then we will close this out. Thank you for putting the information page back too.
Yeah, so let me conclude by saying, as I did it, as your introduction stated, we will be looking into every question that gets certified by the Board of State Canvassers So once it qualifies for the ballot, then we begin our work in starting to analyze it. So once we get to October and leading into the November ballot, you can come to our website at crcmich.org. You can follow us on these social media channels, and we'll have information for you to think about. What are the pros and cons? What are the issues to think about? How should I formulate an informed vote? And we often work with the League of Women Voters. They've often linked to our analysis. So on that vote 411 or otherwise, I'm sure we'll have access to our analyses of these questions. So thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to working with the League in many other ways.
I did have one hand raised, but I lost the person who apparently put the hand down. So if you would like to be unmuted, I will be happy to unmute you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lupher. We really appreciate your presentation. It was very professional, very informed, and I too appreciate the nonpartisan nature of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming this evening.
Did that person raise their hand?
I saw another hand raised and then I couldn't find the person. So I think this may be a ghost of some sort. The ghost in the machine. All right. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. And I don't have the date right here, but our next program will be the second Tuesday in May. I don't have an Eventbrite posting created for it yet, but we will be publicizing it in pretty much the same way that we have been. Thank you, Eric. Really helpful information. And I will be checking your website in the fall.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl and Ruth and Rhonda. Really appreciate your help. And good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much, Eric. It was wonderful. I truly learned so much. So I'll listen to the recording just to make sure I got some of it in my brain now. But thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Good night. Thank you.